This idea lesson will focus on extraction, summarizations, and potentially appending databases. Actually, first what we're going to do is we're actually going to go ahead and append a database. So going back to the data files that we pulled into IDEA, remember that we have a beginning inventory quantity database, we have an inventory price and cost database, and we also have a database with inventory sales quantity. So let's say, and if we go ahead and open up our inventory price and cost database, we'll notice that we have our product numbers, product class, description, sales price, unit cost, as well as we put in a calculated field called gross margin. And I know it's calculated because you'll see that the text is a different color than the other imported fields. So if we go into, you can also identify it because it's virtual numeric, which is the default when we go ahead and we append a field to our database. So I'm just going to click out of that. What we're going to do first is, let's say we want to merge the inventory price and cost database with the inventory sales quantity. And I'm just going to show these side by side, so I'm going to show them vertically. For both of my databases, I have product number, and if I hover over my product number, they are in the same format, they're a numerical format. And I want to pull in the sales quantity into the database that has the inventory price and cost so that I can do some calculations for my revenue as well as my cost of goods sold, and then come up with a gross margin for the entire population, and then I could potentially even summarize it based off of product class or what have you, and certain sort of criteria. So in order to do that, I have to figure out exactly how I want to pair up my two databases. And so really what that means is that you have to have a primary key between two databases. The primary key does not need to be named the exact same field name. However, it needs to be in the same format. Format, what I mean is that it needs to be, if it's a numerical field in one database, it has to be a numerical field in another database. If it's character in one, it needs to be character in the other. So that's the format piece I was talking about. So if ever you're uncertain, what you can do is go ahead and double click in your database. What you'll find out, or it'll pull up your field manipulation, which is all of the fields in that particular database as well as the type associated with them. So in our inventory sales quantity database, our product number is numeric and it's 8 digits. If I go ahead and click out of that, if I go into my inventory price, I click somewhere in there, I double click, all of my fields will open up, my field manipulation will open up. I see product number, it's also numeric with an 8 length. So I'm comparing the same field type to one another. So even if one was called product NO, the other one, or it's prod NO, it was called product number, or some other field type or field name, I would still be able to match them up together because they are the same type. So I can go ahead and click OK. So what I'm going to do, actually, if we go on to our ribbon that is called our analysis ribbon, which is where we'll do a good portion of our analysis, is that you see this over here related to the relate area. We have the option to join. So join is actually going to take two existing databases. It's going to match them based on common fields, or in other words, primary keys. It's going to match them together, and it's going to create a new database with either all of the fields, if that's what we select, or some of the fields from both databases. So if we're looking at these two side by side, the only duplication that we see is product number. So just because this inventory sales quantity database only has two fields that we would consider including. So what we want to do is make sure that we don't see product number twice, because that could potentially be duplicative. So let's go ahead to our join. Now what will end up happening is it's going to select your primary database based off of what was selected. So, and you can tell I was selected and I was in the inventory price and cost database because that's what's showing as being grayed out right now, and that's the primary database name that's showing. So if I go ahead and click on this little fields icon, it'll give me all of the fields that are included in that database. So if I want to go ahead and include all of those fields, I can just keep it as okay. I can clear all and then select which ones I want, but we're going to select all of them anyway. So you can just click include all, or if you want to just select a few of them, you can clear and then hold down control as you go and select multiple fields and go ahead and click OK. So make sure all are selected. If we were putting some type of criteria on this database with our join, meaning some sort of restriction, we can go ahead and put some sort of criteria formula in, and that's designated by this little calculator icon. Remember, when we select the calculator icon, our equation editor will pop up, which is basically our formula box. So it gives us an opportunity, if we would like, to further restrict what's included from the primary database. So maybe we were looking for, if we were pulling, those that have sales price greater than, $5.99, we could put that criteria on that to further restrict the joining of our databases. But we're going to do all. Our secondary database, you have to do select, and that'll basically take you to your project, and you will select your secondary database. So we're going to select the inventory sales quantity. When you go through and do your join, you want to double check to make sure your primary and your secondary database are not the same, because sometimes it gets confusing over what you've selected. Notice that we have the same number of records in both, so that could mean we have a one-for-one match. We may not, though. We'll find out. You'll go ahead and select your fields, and this will give you all of the options that are in that database. So remember that we pulled in our Excel file, we had some blank columns that pulled into our database. So we definitely don't want to select column 3 and column 4. We do not want to replicate product number, so we're only going to select sales quantity. Let's go ahead and click OK. Now, you want to rename it something. It generally, if you're doing a join, it'll just say join databases. You want to give it something descriptive based off of what you're actually doing. So this is going to be, let's say we're going to call this sales of inventory recalc. And that's where we're going to do our recalculations of our sales figures with both our sales pricing and our unit costs to come up with, gross margins and what have you that we can go ahead and then sort of summarize. So you'll see right next to the file name, there's an option for us to match. So match is where you go ahead and you select your primary key. So in the first primary database, or the first database we selected, which is our inventory price and cost database, is asking us for what do we want to match on. So that'll be our product number, because that's going to be our primary key. It asks what order do you want your data to be merged or joined, like what's the file order. So if it's a numerical value, it'll be ascending, descending. It'll also apply to character fields. It'll just be in alphabetical order or reverse alphabetical order. Your secondary database gives you the options to, it'll go to the database, it'll identify all of the field names and have you select. Notice that in parentheses next to the field name, it tells you the type of the field, so it's numeric. So where you would have an issue with this join is if product number in our one database was labeled with a C, which means character, and in the second one it was labeled with an N, which means numeric. So they have to be the same type. So you're looking for 2 N's or 2 C's or 2 D's if you're matching on date. You just want to make sure that those two fields are in the same format. So if we go ahead and click OK. Now we have options down here below. We can go ahead and select between the two databases matches only, so that means that both of the primary keys have to be in both databases for it to come onto or be a record in the joined database. We can do records with no secondary match, which means that it's only going to retrieve and actually, as I hover, you can read the description. Extracts records from the primary database that have no match in the secondary database. So those are things that are in the inventory price and costing that were not in the inventory sales quantity. Okay, so we could also see records with no primary match, so extracts records from the secondary database that have no match in the primary. So these two are opposite of one another. All records in the primary file, so no matter what's in the primary, it's going to it's going to pull in our output, and then you could do all records in both. So I guess whenever in doubt, and if you're looking to see, because I guess in theory there could be a record in the inventory price and costing file that is not in the inventory sales quantity file. Um, so that could potentially be we could have pricing and then just not have any sales related to a particular inventory item. So that could be an instance where we could see through this join where something could not match up 100%. When in doubt, you want to use all records in both files because that'll give you an indicator, and I'll explain what that looks like. Give you an indicator if something's missing from one versus the second. Okay, so keep in mind from the secondary database, the only thing we're pulling in is the sales quantity. So that means if that field is missing or it's blank when we complete our join, that means it wasn't in our secondary database. If we have a quantity and we do not have any other information, so any of these other fields, that means that it wasn't in our primary database, which is the inventory price and cost. So if I go ahead and click OK, you'll notice IDEA will go ahead and it starts to do its processing. So let me close the two databases that I had open before, and let's just go to our joined database, which we labeled as sales of inventory recalc. So once again, if I go to my product number and I put an index on, which remember an index is simply a sort based on either ascending or descending order, you'll notice I have a product number for each and every single one of my records. Also too, down here in the lower right hand corner where I'm circling with the cursor, you'll notice it says 152 records, which means that we have 152 records in our joined database, which most likely means that it was a one-for-one match between both of our databases. So if we go to product number and we see that we have a product number for each and every record, that means that every single product number was in our primary database. Now let's check to see if if we had a sales transaction for each and every single product number that was in our inventory price and cost database. So if I go to my sales quantity and I go ahead and I sort on the sales quantity, I can see I only had one record that has a 0. So what does that mean? And we can actually go back to our inventory sales quantity and see if there was a numerical value of 0 recorded for sales quantity, or maybe there just was no transaction for that. So for a router box description, I'm going to go back to open up our inventory sales quantity, and what I'm going to do is actually show these side by side. I'm going to, and actually because I only have product number, I have to match it based off of product number. So let's see. Okay, it's it's this one. Okay, I want to go ahead and I want to scroll down in my inventory sales quantity until I find 4022, 4022. 24984, and I see that in my database I had sales quantity equal to 0. So that was, it did pull in, it wasn't a match, so it was a one-for-one match between the two databases. So now that I have my two databases joined and now I have this one very nice, neat database, I can now go ahead and I can do recalculations on this if I want, or I can even do summarizations. And since we already appended fields, let's try doing a summarization. So once again in our analysis ribbon, you'll see in the categorize section, we have this little icon that says summarize. So if we go ahead and click on that, what that allows us to do is to go ahead and to summarize some of our transactions based off of different criteria that we can go ahead and set. So let's say we wanted to get a feel for sales quantity based off of product class. So similar to how you would think about generating a pivot table, you're coming in with some sort of question that you want answered based off of the summarization. So here it would tell us, what is the total quantity sales in quantity for the different product classes. So you're trying to figure out which product class has the most amount of sales in quantity. So our fields to summarize would be our product class, because that's going to be one way in which our data is going to go ahead and it's going to sort or summarize. Excuse me. And then we're going to go ahead and pick over here the field, numerical fields to total. So the field that we want to look at is just going to be our sales quantity. So we're going to go ahead and do that. And now you'll notice we have options. We can add in a criteria. If we want that'll take us to the equation editor, which will allow us to go ahead and add further limitation on our data. Or we can do quick summarization. We can create a separate database, which is the default. The file name is called summarization. We're going to go ahead and we are going to change it to something more descriptive. So let's see, quantity sales by product class. Okay. Also too here, we could pick multiple numerical fields if we want, or we could just pick one. And these are the options for us. We can do sum, we can do max, min, average, variance, standard variance. If we create a result, that basically will create a result over here. And that allows us to click back and forth between our data to the result if we so choose. So let's just say we want to get let's say we want min, max, and the sum. Okay, and we're going to look at that together. So if I pick multiple statistics, I can go ahead and click OK. What you'll notice is that a new database, which is showing as a sub database, or the relationship is it's connected to our sales of inventory recalc, and it's showing the summarization. So based off of the criteria we set, the product class is going in ascending order. You'll notice it counts the number of recs, or number of records. Also too, it's blue and there's an underscore underneath it, so I can click on it and get to the detail of the 17 records that make up these totals that you see here. So there's the sum. There is the quantity max, quantity min. So because I pulled in the sum, the max, and the min, you can see that all of those are included within my summarization. So now if I wanted to find the product class that had the largest quantity of sales, I could just go ahead and put an index on my sales quantity sum so that it was going in descending order, and I could very easily get my answer that product class 5 had the greatest quantity of sales. I can also, put a index on my sales quantity max. I also see product 5 has the greatest quantity, so that's per individual transaction. And then for a minimum, I see that product class number 4 had a transaction with a minimum quantity of 0, which we saw in our data set earlier.